Hello everybody. I haven't done a video for quite a long time now because I was sick last year, and John was in London. He had to see his dad, so he wasn't able to come and do some filming. And I've had excuse me, I'll just take these off because I snapped I damaged my glasses, unfortunately, so I've got another pair. So I haven't been able to put out any new videos, and it's been like 2 months since I've actually done anything. So somebody mentioned, when are we going to do another video, because I'm here with Shane, so I'm sure we'll do a live stream at some point. So anyway, this is an update on my video channel, and I just thought I brought some books here that I've been buying, because I'm forever buying new books, and I can't actually read them all because there's so many. So I just say this is my library, because at some point I will take these books down from my library and read them. And not only that, because I've got so many books, I now have put up a new bookshelf, which is very important. So I've got access to a lot of the books, because what's been happening is, because I've been buying so many, I've been stacking them up like bricks, and then after a while you can't find them because you can't see them, and I haven't sort of organised them from their historical perspective. If it's the Weimar Republic, I'll put all the books with the Weimars. In the 20s, the Nazi era, and the 30s, World War II, post-war, Cold War, Berlinologist, and so on and so forth. So the first book that I would like to show you is one that I've got here. It's called Hitler, the Last 10 Days. Now, anytime I've got Hitler Bunker, if I see a Hitler Bunker book that I don't have, I will pick it up. I'd like to see if there's any more information that I can find that I don't know about, or there's some quirk or some detail, small detail, however insignificant. I'd like to find it. This one, however, has got Alec Guinness on the cover. He's playing the role of Hitler in a movie that he made in 1973, and this book is like a tie-in. I haven't read it, but I like the size because it's relatively small, and it's almost like I won't be overwhelmed when I do get to read it. But it's always useful to try and find an angle, a perspective from the author when he takes on something significant and historic as the Hitler Bunker, because it was the end of the regime, of the Nazi regime, and the beginning of a new one. So yeah, Hitler's Last 10 Days with Alec Guinness on the cover, which is unusual, but it's well worth mentioning. Let's see what I've got here. Now the next book I want to show you, unfortunately, doesn't have a dust jacket on it. It's just, this is how it's come. The book's called, gosh, I can't even read it with these glasses. Let's see. From Hitler to Albrecht. Albrecht was the leader of the GDR, which is the German Democratic Republic, is the old East Germany, and this is taken from 1945 to 1946. This because what's tricky and difficult to comprehend is what actually happened post-war, say from 1945 to 1949. What actually happened during the course of that time? And this is a book that it focuses on 1 year. Now, I have other books at home that focus on just 1 year. I know that Mark Lewison is wanting to do a book on the Beatles, focusing on each year. So he would publish a book on the Beatles from 1963 to 1969, or 1962 to 1969, or 1970. And he'd write a whole book. Now this focuses on 1 year, from 1945 to 1946, and it's so little known. That's the thing about it. Unless you really dig for this information, unless you really focus and concentrate and trying to find the right materials in order to study what happened from 1945 to 1946, because there's so little known. And Albrecht is a name that not many people know of unless you've studied German history. So that's the reason why I picked this book. You know, like I say, the only disappointment is that it doesn't have a dust jacket, unfortunately. But anyway, let's see. So I've got a whole collection here. Now, just go back a bit because I missed this. This is called The Battle for Berlin, 1945. Again, it focuses on pretty much the last 10 days or so, I would say. The Seelow Heights was a very significant battle because it really was the defence of Berlin. Once the Russians broke through the Seelow Heights, there was nothing stopping them from getting to Berlin. Tony Letizier, he was the Governor General of Spandau, where Hess was prisoner, and it was at that time that Hess allegedly committed suicide. And Tony Letizier is one of the best historians of Berlin of that era, from the end of World War II up to the 80s, I would say. If I ever see a book by Tony Letizier, I always pick it up. It's what's so good about books like this. It focuses on the particular battles, and the battle for Berlin only lasted like I said, 10 days. So that's actually when they actually got into the city, and it really was. They were desperate to, in order to please Stalin. They said that they wanted to capture Berlin before, I think it was the May Day parade, and they missed out on it by 1 day. They also made a film about the Battle for Berlin. I haven't got to see it yet. I wish I was able to, but I haven't seen it. I've only seen clips of it, and a lot of clips get used in documentaries. But once I get hold of it, you know, it'll open my eyes, because that's one thing that's so fascinating with history, is finding things that you've never seen before, reading books that you've never read before, and this is where you're able to expand your knowledge to a point where you're fluent with it. You're able to express it, and in my case, you know, I wanted to be a tour guide, so I had the hope of maybe one day being a tour guide and actually going to some of the sites and discussing them with a group of people, maybe 10, 12, 15 people, and for them to actually see what you're saying. They actually understand, and they can picture it in their own minds as to what happened. But yeah, the battle for Berlin was ferocious. And it was a relief when it ended. Let's see what I've got here. The next book is a book that I picked up a while back, and I picked this up in an Oxfam shop, and there's not many books that I find in the wild. You know, a lot of my books, I would say 98% of the books that I've got, I have to acquire them from the internet, because this is just a bit too specialised. But this book here, The Cold War, it's arranged by the educational system. So if you were to try and get a diploma in history, you'd have to study a book like this. Now, books like these are presented in such a way that history is almost fluid. By that I mean the scholars and the professors who present the information is done in such a way that that is favourable to the West, and compromises, I would say, the Soviet Union's view of the Cold War. They will have a different view. So there is a sense of bias in this, and then there's also a sense of covering up pieces of information. Now I'll get onto that. This is what I call textbook history. Textbook history is, like I just mentioned, it's the history that gets presented in a certain way for the average person. It's almost like the news. They will present the news in a certain way because they have an agenda, and that agenda is to try and influence the viewers in a way that makes it favourable to the government or whoever is in power. With a book like this, I call textbook history. So it kind of like it irons out the creases in the history. That's the only way I can actually explain it. It kind of dilutes it a little bit. So the things that went on that make the West in some way not favourable, they will then remove that from the history books. So that's why I call this textbook history. It's a way of actually cleaning history. It's making it purer than what it really was. The next book I have here calls Documents on Berlin from 1943 to 1963. Now, I call this type of history forgotten history. Forgotten history means that the history is in some way it's obscured. It's like you have to really dig for the history. You have to go you have to look for it in old newspapers, in magazine articles, documents that were released to the public and yet have since sort of disappeared. Information you can extract from people by interviewing them who were around at the time to give you a clearer perspective of actually what happened. Now this is like a book of documents, and it's been published in book form, and this is one of the books that, like I said, I tend to look for these books because of the information that they have that haven't been in any way, I'd use the word diluted, or that they might have removed certain bits of text from the documents, so that what happens is that if there's anything untoward to say, like the German government or to the Americans or the French or the British, they would then remove it. So there's only so much that you can do, unless you actually see the original documents where they haven't been redacted in any way. This is what you get. So anything that they release to the general public, like a book like this, sometimes you can get away with it. Sometimes they'll be able to say things that perhaps wasn't favourable to the governments of the day. But books like these, you probably have to go to the British Library, and you may have to gain permission, and they may allow you to read the documents or read any rare books that they may have, but you can't take them from the library. You have to read them there at the library in order to get the information that you seek. So yeah, I would call this Documents on Berlin forgotten history. This is a book I just got fairly recently. It's called The CIA in the Cold War, a memoir. Now this book here, Breckenridge by Scott D. Breckenridge. discusses the operations that this CIA operative had done. He joined the CIA in the 50s, and I think he left in the late 70s. Now, I've read part of this book. I haven't read all of it, and he speaks fondly of the CIA. There isn't anything that he says that that will compromise the organisation, and there's a good chance that the CIA had to read his book before he was able to publish it. But I was determined to find a book on the CIA because I wanted to know what the CIA were doing in Berlin. Now, this particular gentleman who wrote this book never at any point was in Berlin. He was in, I think, in Vietnam. He was in Laos. He was in South America and things like that. But he wasn't in Berlin. And the reason I bought the book is because I wanted to get a flavour of what the CIA were like when they're in their operations. Because the CIA they will go all over the world doing all kinds of operations like coups, assassinations, trying to influence or giving money to an opposition that are favour to the Americans, and they will force out the government of the day by putting that particular party into power. But this is this is with the intention of making it so that if the Americans wanted favours or they wanted to have like some kind of deal for corporations, the American corporations that they have, or privatising the industry in that particular country, so that the American corporations could buy out, water, gas, electricity, any kind of chemicals, pharmaceuticals, then that makes it favourable to the Americans. And what they do is they will take care of the government that's in power by giving them favours, by helping the politicians that are in government, by sending their sons and daughters to the best universities in the United States, and things like that. But you will always be beholden to the Americans, and that's why America's a superpower, and that's why America's effectively an empire. And the CIA, when they do their operations around the world, that's how they maintain their power. That's how they keep their power and effectively keep everybody in check, all the government, the countries around the world in check. But now, however, things seem to be going awry with these what are described as forever wars, because wars are expensive, and when it comes to a war like in Ukraine, which I would describe as a proxy war, it's very difficult to keep all the balls in the air, because there's only so long that you can juggle. And I think now it's becoming more evident and a lot clearer to the general public as to what's really going on and how organisations like the CIA operate. First steps to Deton, which is what I've just tried to describe. American diplomacy and the Berlin crisis of 1959 to 1963. This was a book that I was desperate to find. I was seeing this book going for about £60. I managed to get it for about 20, and it's pretty much all that I've just sort of described. But it goes into a lot more detail, and it's specific to Berlin. There's another book here I've got. It's called Harold Macmillan. Let's see, I can't see it with these glasses. Hold on. And the Berlin Wall Crisis, 1958 to 1962. Now, this was a book I had my eye on for many years. I couldn't buy it because it was so expensive. It was going at £80, £90. I think the last price I saw it was £109. I managed to get this book for £34. As soon as I saw it at that price, I said, I snapped it up. I've really wanted to get this book because there's so little in the way of information from the British perspective and the French perspective. Now, I get a lot from the American perspective, but not from the British and the French. And when you find out what actually goes on, because I mean, Kennedy was in power at the time, and he was getting a lot of pressure, not just from Khrushchev, but he was getting it from Macmillan and de Gaulle, and because each government was setting out their own stall and looking out for their own interests. So they wanted to have everything favourable to them. Kennedy, who was canny and a very good president, would listen to what Khrushchev would say and what de Gaulle would say and what Macmillan would say, but then he would make his own decision for himself and for the good of the United States and the world, I would say. I think Kennedy was a very, very good diplomat, and it's almost a skill that a lot of politicians today no longer have. But yeah, this is a book that I hope at some point to read through, because I have, like I said, I've been lusting for this book for a long time, and now that I have it in my hands, it's going to be a book that's well worth taking the time to read. Now I've got a book here because I've mentioned in my other videos I want to focus from 1914 to 1994, but this book here, it's called Giles MacDonough, and this book is starts before then. It starts in I would say in the 1800s, but it even goes back, before the Huguenots. But I'll read you a passage because it's very interesting, and it gives the best description of what this book is really about. It says, after more than 50 years in limbo, Germany's greatest city is about to become the capital once again. So what he's saying is that the Berlin Wall has now come down, and that's why he's described, he's written what he's just written there. So he said, Berlin was founded by the Germans in the 13th century, but its 700-year history is little known outside Germany. British and American writers have concentrated chiefly on Weimar and the Third Reich, and not on the city's earlier and more positive legacy. Yeah, I think that's very true. In this book, Giles Donohoe redresses the balance. He shows Berlin history in various incarnations: the trading town, the royal residence, the garrison town, and the industrial city, the capital of the new German nation, and the cosmopolitan city of the early 20th century, the capital of the Third Reich, the divided city after 1945, and finally Berlin as it is today. He paints a multifaceted picture, drawing from a wide range of sources, which range from archives to the Berlin novel. Organised thematically, rich with anecdotes, the book includes material on aspects of Berlin life as diverse as food, cafes, working life, architecture, crime, slang, education, theatre, music, riots, assassins, leisure time. It also includes an area-by-area tour of Berlin, showing how it's made up of villages with very different identities. The retired colonel in Lichterfelde, the locomotive mechanic in Moabit, the dropout in Charlottenburg, and the university professor in Dahlem. This book will challenge our views of one of Europe's great cities. I couldn't have said it any better than that. That, in my mind, is a fantastic description of what this book is about. But like I said, I focus mainly on from 1914 to 1994. However, this gives a backstory to the city, and it's books like these that actually give you a wider picture and a wider understanding of what Berlin is really about. I wish to learn more, because I know I knew a little bit about the Huguenots when the Huguenots went to Berlin, but I haven't gone to any depth because the subject is so massive and so wide. Right, so I'm coming up to the last two. Now this book here on both sides of the wall. Let's see. Preserving monuments and sites of the Cold War era. Berlin seems to be in a rush, in a hurry to change. When I was in Berlin last, all I saw on the skyline were these cranes. So it's all, when you see that, you know that Berlin is constantly being built, rebuilt, buildings torn down, new buildings been put in its place, and so on and so forth. That it changes. It seems to change from decade to decade, and unless you're there to see it, you'd be maybe surprised and maybe on the other side devastated to see the rapid change of a city, because you'd like to see it the same. You don't like to see it change. But with a book like this, you've got a lot of these people that are scholars and professors and people, experts on Berlin and on Berlin history. And as far as the Cold War is concerned, there are areas that are, if they don't have like a form of protection, they will just tear down the monument or whatever it might be, in order to gentrify that area of Berlin, for example. So this book here would be a really decent book to actually have, in order for you to be able to, or for me to be able to read the city, because there are people like tour guides and city planners that can read a city, and even those that are in real estate. They have a really good eye. They know what they're looking for. They know how traffic runs through a city, and they know how to give a good description and perhaps draw it on a map, of how the city of Berlin will look like in the future. But this is a different book in the sense that this is trying to preserve and protect those sites that have a historical significance. And if you have somebody like that actually looks out for this, that actually is a good form of education, to actually help educate those people that don't really know much about Berlin, but would have a better understanding by those that are experts, and will be able to sort of pass on their passion to those that may have like a tourist, for example, tourists that go to Berlin. They'll have an interest in wanting to know a little bit more about the history and how rich the history is as far as Berlin's concerned. Now the last book is The Fall of the Berlin Wall. If I see what it is here. The Revolutionary Legacy of 1989. Now you can see here in the cover, it's like, a guy with an axe or a sledgehammer, because they were known as wall pickers. They were actually using chisels and mallets to pick pieces off of the wall. And then, you could still buy them on Amazon, but I doubt it will be an original piece of the wall. It's just a bit of concrete where they'll put some spray paint to give the impression that it's that it came down from the Berlin Wall. But my guess is that it doesn't. This is the part of the history I can't say that I'm really passionate about. I should be, but for me it's the building of the Berlin Wall in the first place, not the tearing down of the Berlin Wall in 1989. But it has its place in history, and it's something that has to be studied. And I have to say that my focus would be more on why the Berlin Wall was built in the first place, rather than the tearing down of the Berlin Wall that they eventually did. So, but it's useful to know, and I do know this, if there's any courses, like university courses and things like that, you end up having to learn parts of history that perhaps you don't have a passion for, and yet you really need to learn about that bit, and then after you've learned it, you'll probably be glad that you did. And that's why I picked up this book. I think it was a really seismic time during the Berlin history in 1989, and I must say I regret having not been there when it came down. I saw it on television, but I just didn't have the courage to actually go to the buy a ticket and fly over there, because I was fearful that I might not find a hotel room or a bed and breakfast where I could lay my head. So that moment in history is forever lost. So that pretty much concludes my presentation. Now I've done this at Shane's home, so there's not going to be any fancy editing, with John. We'll do that another time. I hope to do a video presentation on Christian F. and on Karl Marx, but until then, auf Wiedersehen.